On today's episode of Coffee in Conscious Conversation, we're honored to welcome a truly transformative guest, Michelle Mae. As a biofeedback specialist, life coach, mentor, and speaker, Michelle helps individuals and organizations uncover hidden stress patterns, renew their thinking, and step into clarity and purpose. Through her work in quantum biofeedback, coaching, and mentoring, she empowers people to break through emotional and mental barriers, creating space for growth and resilience. Whether working with professionals, teams, or even our beloved pets, Michelle brings a holistic approach to well-being and conscious living. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join us as we dive into an inspiring conversation with Michelle Mae.
And welcome to another episode of Coffee and Conscious Conversation. I am so inspired to have a wonderful guest on the podcast today. This is Michelle Mae, and she's a biofeedback specialist. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
No, it's so good to have you, and I'm really excited about our conversation that's coming up.
Great. Wonderful. Me too.
What is biofeedback?
Biofeedback is feedback of your energy. It's a type of frequency therapy. I don't know if you know much about frequency and therapy, but it's a frequency therapy.
So that's going to be my question. How can we define frequency in terms of an understanding?
So everything resonates at a particular megahertz, or, there's some type of vibratory sequence to everything, whether it's a table, it's an organ in your body, it's a tree, everything resonates. It has its own frequency. So somebody sat down and they figured out every frequency that you could think of. There's hundreds of thousands of frequencies in this machine. It's a software that hooks to a box that then generates frequency.
How does that frequency that a person, a human or an animal carries resonate to their well-being, their physical, mental, and emotional well-being?
So I don't have a list of megahertz that go with what each individual thing, but I can give you some examples. So let's say a healthy liver would resonate at 500 megahertz. Well, if it's not resonating at that, and I ask your body that question, I ask your liver a question like, what are you resonating at? And it says 200 megahertz, then that means it's not operating at 100% of its capability. So I can then send frequency to it, and it will start to resonate at the 520 megahertz or whatever is healthy, a healthy liver. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Does this form part of, I'm going to call it, a natural way of holding one's frequency intact within its necessary structures? Is that what we're talking about?
So how the machine actually works that I have is it asks your body a series of 7,000 questions, and then your body sends back a report and says, here's what's wrong, here's the order in which we can start to resolve it. But then I start feeding frequency to whatever that list is, and then it reduces the stress inside your body. So it makes it easier for your body to come back into homeostasis.
Okay, and what is homeostasis?
That is the well-being of your body. That is how your body is at 100%, which I don't know that our bodies are ever in 100% homeostasis. Our body is always trying to put us in that. You hear stress, stress takes you out of that because stress, shuts down the rest and digest, and you go into fight or flight. And so there's not enough energy to keep your rest and digest and keep you at peace. So the goal of feeding frequency to somebody is to keep doing it until they can come into a calm, peaceful place, and they can switch in and out of fight or flight or rest and digest, or it would be sympathetic or parasympathetic in their nervous system.
I think the process, from what I see within my own client base of working with specific frequencies and energies, is a resistance that may happen on certain levels, and people are not paying attention necessarily to the the nervous system, the parasympathetic system, that kind of thing. They are talking about not feeling well, brain fog. They may be explaining it as some particular dynamic that they can be aware of, but not relating it to the nervous system.
That's a really good point, because when I was younger, I was running multi-million-dollar companies, and my mom would say to me, "You're stressed." And I'm like, "I'm not stressed." She's like, "You're stressed." I'm like, "I'm not stressed." I did not understand how stress showed up in your body. I thought it was more because I could go to sleep at night and maybe my mind wasn't racing the way I thought that stress affected you, but it was affecting me. I had a nervous stomach. I didn't eat much. I couldn't eat much because my stomach would get upset. And I didn't understand that that was a sign of stress. The racing thoughts is a sign of stress. If I always have to have coffee to stay awake, that's a sign of stress. If I'm irritable, that's a sign of stress. I did not understand that. So that's a really good point to bring up, because sometimes people don't know what stress actually looks like in their mind and their body. So that's a really great point, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's very clear when I see people, and they are absolute stress balls, reactionary on every level, emotionally, mentally, verbally, physically happening, but they do not understand what stress is and what it's doing to them at any one particular moment. And the
Yeah.
result is when you put them into a state where the stress is releasing, they just pass out because the frequency that comes in of that moment is just overwhelming.
And sometimes even so, how I structure my sessions is I do the frequency work and then we have a conversation. And sometimes, just like what we're doing here, just having a conversation with somebody, I am of the school of thought that everybody should have a paid coach or mentor. And there's a reason for that, because when you're not burdening the people around you, and sometimes the people around you are the ones who are stressing you out and you need to talk about that, you talk about it with someone else, it's so much more helpful to get a different perspective or perception on something that you're dealing with, and that person isn't going to go back to the other people and tell them what you said. So that's also can be extremely helpful to your staying in a higher vibration and calming your nervous system down, to see that, number one, everybody isn't the same. Not everybody is everybody's alike in the way that we have stress and we have to deal with it, but not everybody sees things exactly the same way. And sometimes it's really great to get a different perspective from somebody.
I think it's very important to understand that dynamic and that need,
Yeah.
because, we talk about belief systems, and I know we've spoken previously about that, how one's belief systems that have been assumed, taken on, taught, drilled into us, create specific outcomes of who we think we are at any one particular moment. Meantime, we're something completely different. We're just not able to recognize it or reach towards that particular aspect of, I'm going to use the word beingness, Michelle, just for the sake
Yeah.
of our conversation at this moment. And people know deep within themselves what it is that they want. They want to be happy. They want to be peaceful. They want to be loved and loving and kind. I think that's an inherent quality within humanity. And yet so many are not able to achieve it because they don't have somebody pointing the way.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree.
and if you're going to be learning to do something like vocals, coaching, you need a coach of some level that's going to help you through that particular and point the way forward. That's the way to success. Business, you need a coach. You need a money coach. You need somebody pointing out the way forward or the potential of the way forward so that you can examine it. And then those things become yours. You can't
Mm-hmm.
live somebody else's path, but you can live yours. And you can only discover what your path is through experience.
Yeah.
So, yes, life coach or a mentor or somebody that's guiding those particular aspects of some things along the way, but it takes an enormous amount of trust to
Mm-hmm.
actually give your belief systems to somebody else.
It's true. And what's the difference between healthy stress and unhealthy stress? It's just simply your perception and your perspective of the stress that's in front of you, whether it's going to be healthy or unhealthy, because you really do need stress in your life to help you grow. You need to have failure in order to have success. Failure is part of success. So I don't think, I think we're just coming into a different consciousness now where we're really starting to look at things differently. You don't have to do one thing for a career. You can have multiple things that you do for a career. You don't have to do one thing. You could have 2 or 3 different part-time things that you really do enjoy. Learning how to go with the flow of life instead of paddling, upstream. That's part of it too. And you're right, you do need a coach, especially if you're like a vocal coach, acting. You need people who have already done it to show you how they did it, and then you can put your twist on it.
That's right, and personalize it and individualize your own uniqueness into that particular process. Because, I mean, how many people have we got on our planet? 8 billion, I think, was the last.
8 billion. I think it was 8.2 the last time I looked. Yep.
That's a lot of people walking around. And,
that's right. That's funny because I used to hear I'm in my 50s. So when I was a kid, I used to hear this saying about, you have to get your piece of the pie. And what I realized as I've become older is there is no one pie. Everybody has their own particular pie, and you're supposed to be taking a piece out of your own pie. We don't need to take it from somebody else. We need to develop it and focus on who we are and what unique gifts we have, because everybody does have unique gifts.
Very much, and learn to bake your own pie, especially if you like apple pie or.
That's right. That's right.
I think it's an important thing to work with. Yes, I was just with my father this morning, very elderly man now. But he tells me he really prefers just to be alone in his life. That's what he likes. He was brought up that way. So now one can't go ahead and change all of that because that's what he perceives to be himself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the conversation turned to upbringing and the way he was doing things, and he was brought up to believe what was right or wrong. And he was brought up to work until he couldn't work anymore and then do some more in order to succeed. And sure, he had a big family he had to take care of, which, he created as he went along. But that belief system of having to work hard will get you somewhere is exactly what I feel we're talking now, unless you know how to bake. And perhaps the lesson is to let go of those belief systems and learn to bake. So I think we're going to call this podcast Learn to Bake.
I like that. My dad used to say to me, that all the things that I couldn't do, and it would make me annoyed because, I didn't want to hear that. But he also knew how to speak the language I needed to hear, because when he would tell me, oh, you can't do that, guess what I would do? I would rise up and do it. So I only had a high school education. So when I started to get into management, I was very young. I was in my 20s. I think the reason I could do that was because I was raised on a farm. And you have to become a lot of things when you are on a farm. So my brother and I did a lot of farming, and it really did help develop us into who we were. But I also first started my career by doing what you're saying. I work. So it took me, the very first time I met somebody who didn't have a job and was really successful was when I lived in Florida, in Palm Beach. And I was like, okay, so that was the first time I was introduced to people who were not working hard, they were working smart. And that was pretty incredible because, my dad was like, oh, you can't manage that company. You don't know anything about plumbing supplies. And I was like, well, they think I can. So I started to do it and I was good at it. So, I learned, okay, I have to switch my thinking now. I don't know how to think outside of that box of here's a job and I work really hard. It took me, there wasn't mentors. That was not a popular thing back then. So I had to learn to challenge myself in ways of, well, what could I do? And how could this look? If other people are doing, my first thought was, if somebody else is doing it, I can do it, right? I might not be able to do exactly what they're doing, but there's something else I can do. So that was the first place that I took my mind, or the first time I really opened it to something totally different. And it took years after that to develop this, but that was the first introduction. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but.
And of course, it was the process of learning what it is that you had become through the experiences of what you were having at that point.
Yeah. because everybody kept telling me, oh, you have to have a college degree to run a company. And I was like, no, you don't. I went to high school. So I was fine. I met a lady who was a um, successful, wealthy woman, and a friend of mine wanted to introduce me to this person. And we were talking one day, and she was kind of downing me for not having an education. And I said to her, I think it's amazing that you have an education and that you could do that. I'm sure I had learning disabilities. I just, back then they didn't know what it was. They just labeled you as lazy, and they moved on. So I didn't have the confidence to think that I could go to college or I could learn stuff like that. So I have an admiration for people who do have that. But as we were in the conversation, she was kind of downing me for that. And I was like, what's funny about the difference, like that what you're not seeing is, I said, you have to have somebody tell you how to think. I do not. And she was like, kind of tilted her head. She said, okay, now you have my attention. I said, well, I can go inside of myself and ask questions and find the answers inside of me. You have to go to somebody else and a book to tell you how to do that. And that's part of what I do now is I help people go back inside themselves to find that voice so that they can also learn to follow their inside unique voice, maybe not necessarily always something on the outside. Because if you married the two, where there's education and that inner voice, wow, you'd be unstoppable.
Well, there's not a way, but there is the way.
There's
And
a lot of different
for
ways.
yourself, that's
Yeah.
what makes one unique. What's coming to mind here is the wonderful saying that the meek will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
But I've also, like you, learned over the last while that the meek have to have a certain amount of fire burning within themselves in order to get that spark of realization going for the self that
Yes.
this is what I need to do and that's what I'm going to be doing.
Right. Right. So, I've had bosses where I've had a feeling on something and they're like, oh, you can't talk about feelings at work in a corporation. You can't do that. I'm like, okay, but I know, let me rephrase it. I know something's coming. I can remember when I had this one boss, it was before there was a crash here in 2008 of the economy in Florida. That was the housing crash. And I felt like something was coming. And I remember my boss, the owner of the company, would call me every couple of days and say, I was canceling orders, sending stuff back to the manufacturers, and everybody was making fun of me for it. And he would call me every couple of days and yell at me and say, this is my company. And I'd say, I just need you to trust me. I know something's happening. And in 3 weeks, I pushed back a lot of stuff. And in the end, when it happened, he was just like, I don't even know what to say. I don't know how you even knew that was coming. And I was like, well, this is where you're saying feelings don't have a place in a corporation. They absolutely do.
Mm. Yeah, that intuition is such an important thing
Yep.
for life to guide one's
Yes.
life. But that is
Yes.
also a pyramid or myriad of different realities that can emerge from all of that,
Yes.
depending on a belief system or depending on how clear one has become in terms of allowing one's awareness and consciousness just to rule the roost.
Yeah, it's true. It is true because if you're pessimistic, you're going to get more of that life. And if you're positive, you're going to get more of that life. If you're optimistic, you're going to get more of that life. Because really, what are we like? Antennas, our brains? Your brain is a goal achieving machine. And when you give it something to look for, it is going to go look for it. If you ever get interested in a car, right? If I found a Toyota came out with a newer car over here. I can't think of the name of it, but now I saw it one day and I was like, oh, that thing's beautiful. Do you think I see that thing everywhere now because that's what I focus on, how pretty that particular car is. Now I'm seeing it everywhere. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even see that for, it was been out for a year and a half and I've never seen it until I saw it on a parking lot. And now I see it everywhere because I'm focusing on it. So if I give my brain something to focus on that's good or positive, I'm going to receive more of that because that's really how our brain is. It's like a receiver more than it is a generator.
Can't wait to see the photograph of your new car in your parking area in your driveway.
Right? Me too.
It's
Amen
very
to that.
exciting. Yeah. Why not? Why ever not? So that's the whole process there. I'm just thinking of so many human beings walking on this planet all have a particular role, all need to find their role, their individuality within the mass drive, the mass awareness of what we are seeing. And my opinion, I can literally see how much humanity needs to shift their consciousness. But I observe it, I don't judge it. But I do think that individual consciousness and evolution within consciousness of the self is the yardstick for what will drive humanity forward. In other words, as I change, somebody else can change, and then somebody else can, and so it spreads out. What, just off the top of my head, our question is, what do you think it is that individual needs to be accountable for within themselves in order for this to happen?
I think, what do they have to be accountable to? To themselves.
Right.
They have, like, I don't remember if it was Gandhi or who said, if you want to change the world, you have to change you first. And that is true. If you want to understand what is happening, or if you're complaining about, life is different than the way you lived it when you were a kid, you have to go inside yourself and ask yourself questions. Your self-talk, I think, is something that really has, I think a lot of people just go through life and they don't question themselves and they don't talk to themselves about stuff like, why would I feel this way? Why do I feel, if I'm threatened by, I don't know, another race, or a male instead of a female, then that's a me problem. I need to go inside of me. We have this mindset right now: if somebody triggers you, then they're the bad one. But really what has to happen is, if somebody triggers you on something, what's supposed to be happening is you go back inside yourself and start saying, why is that triggering me? What is that in me that is upset about? And you go inside of yourself. I think right now we go outside of ourselves for other people to tell us how to think, and for the government or religion or whoever the group is tells you this is the expectation. I think you have to go inside, in my opinion, go inside to find the answers to all of that. I've recreated myself a few times because of growth. The person I was when I was 20 years old was way more, I was in a box. And I thought, just like I told you about the work thing, I thought the only way you could get wealthy or have anything was to work really hard. And maybe I worked 2 jobs when I was younger. Actually, I had 2 full-time jobs and 2 part-time jobs. So I liked to get things, and I knew that I had to work for that, but I didn't understand how. So I've recreated myself over my lifetime several times, and it's because I would go back inside myself and say, what is it that's holding me back? If somebody else is doing something in this universe, I can do it as well. I just have to be able to figure out, what do I need to change in my perception in order to do that? So I think you have to be accountable mostly to yourself, because it's not typically somebody else's fault that you are in the shoes you're in. And I think we've been really caught up in that.
I feel that too. I feel there's a new process happening, a new unfolding happening within me, as I say. And what that is, I'd like to see, but it has to also be approached with some enthusiasm, because that old adage of, when sometimes I get one-on-one clients, and in the conversation that we have, I hear this is who I am. At which point, a baseball bat or something within me emerges.
There was the wall that just went up.
That's who you think you are.
Right.
Person A, person B. However, that's just what you perceive yourself to be and prefer to have, but you have not yet reached any point within yourself that can allow that new self to come out, which is more powerful, more perceptive. There's a whole lot of things that goes with allowing oneself to go into a new realm of beingness. Listen to all these fancy words we've got going on here. But, the beingness is so important to actually understand. But it's the belief systems that people have been brought up with, that have been drilled into them, that keeps them like that, keeps them in a sense of inability to experience anything else other than who they
and
to be.
have you ever noticed the pendulum always swings too far the opposite way when we're making a change? So, my parents' generation, some of those families had children because they wanted farm workers. So those children weren't treated well, right?
Mm.
And then we came to our generation, my generation, where it was kind of hands off, right? And then the next generation, it's kind of like the parent has to be responsible for everything. Again, we go way too far and it'll swing back. So we do go too far with something. That's, I think, how we learn. We go way too far this way, way too far the opposite way. And then we go, oh, there's somewhere in the middle that we're supposed to be.
Very much so. And that pendulum swinging is what opens the door to different aspects of the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, just the self-awareness and the self-conversation. I think that right now I know I was in a really toxic relationship at one point, and I kept praying that God would change him. And at one point I was like, okay, you're not doing that. And he was like, because that's not what's happening here. You need to change. And I did. I changed and I learned how to love myself and I moved on because I was the one who actually needed the most change. I was the one who needed to learn to love myself. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be who I am today, right? My whole life, I would say to my mom, it's like I keep growing as a person and I would get more responsibility in careers and jobs. And I was like, why am I making my own life harder? And she goes, I don't think that's what you're doing, Michelle. I think that you're just growing. That's the natural path of growth. And I look back now and I'm like, every single bit of that has played a part in the business that I do now. Every single bit of it, because every person who calls me, I've had some experience that I've already walked through, that they're about to go through or they're starting to go through.
Correct. Playing the part of who you think you were at that
Yes.
point and bringing up every ounce of strength to maintain that character on the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And I can go in and out of fight or flight. Like if I fall down, like my dog tripped me one day and I scraped my knee and I could feel a little fight or flight took off. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm okay. And I shook my hands and got up and I was shifted right back out of it. And I was like, wow, that's really cool because that's what it's supposed to be able to do. If I need to run because something's chasing me, then I can. And when that's over, I need to be able to shake that off and move on to some other thought.
It's a huge dynamic. If we could just look back in retrospect of everything that we experienced in order to be the one that we are right now.
Yeah. What's that saying? Hindsight's 2020, right?
Something like that. Correct. Yes, quite correct. Yes. Hindsight. If I knew then. But I do say, if I knew then what I know now as a youngster, wow, the world would have been not safe. Because you've got a sense of bringing, a higher essence of, it's a vibrational thing, awareness into life. For me, everybody has always said, everybody literally has said, oh, you're filled with wisdom and you've got this and you've got that. Where does it come from? And I go, I don't know. But as I go along, I learn to keep my wisdom to myself, because what's that to share for others that not going to do anything with it? I just don't waste my time or my energy or input into something. I'm happy to plant seeds, but that healer aspect of going in and fixing and helping, that's all gone now. And I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying it.
I'm still in that part. That's what I do for work. So
believe me, the recognition is there and the need is there to jump in. But it's just literally, I feel for me in my process at the moment is to be more authentic within where I am at and go, no, they've got to learn just like I'm learning. Not like I have learned, but I know I am still learning and still walking. I mean, a beautiful realization just to share between us as part of our conversation is I was doing a video last night, and part of it is a video of the ocean coming in over the beach, over the sand. I mean, magnificent. And then I remembered going back as a child of running to the edge of the sea, and the sea would come up and then you'd run backwards because you didn't want to get your feet wet or cold or something like that. And I thought, how one-sided is this? What if I was the ocean? I'd have no worries about encroaching on the beach because that's
Hmm.
who I am. And to me, that
Right.
was a sense of creating oneness,
Good.
that you are
Yeah.
all of those things, not just sitting on a beach, worried about your feet going in.
I like
So where
that.
that will lead to, I don't know, but I had to share it.
Yeah, I like that. I never had that perspective, but I really like that. It's kind of like wildlife right now. Sometimes humans do more damage trying to take care of wildlife. And if they would just, you know, let the wildlife be wildlife and be what they are, the animal would be better off. So you're just making me think about how we treat animals sometimes, and we
Mm.
think we know what's best for them.
Yes, in terms of the stewardship that we have over the assumed stewardship we have over the earth.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yes. I'd rather merge with all of it and be part of it all. And sometimes, you can have this discussion and somebody could be looking at you going, this one's got a bit loony. They've lost it in terms of that woohoo stuff that is going on. Um, but
The
there's a
woohoo
reality.
stuff's more real than anything,
That's
you
it.
know?
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just an unrealized reality for many people.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
yet they'll be the first ones to rush off to the beach or
Hmm.
rush off to the wildlife in the national park or something like that
Hmm.
to relax and rest and enjoy themselves.
There was recently a story I just listened to. There was a walrus in Norway. And this walrus, they had a name for her. Maybe it was Fiona. I don't remember her name. But she, the people that were on boats, she started jumping up on their boats. And, she was kind of becoming a risk because people were interacting instead of just like letting her there. They were trying to take selfies. And I guess in I don't know if it was the local authorities decided that because now people made her a menace, they had to euthanize her. So, and that's an example of, everybody needed to, people were coming from other countries to take pictures or selfies with this walrus that
Mm.
ultimately had to be put down because they wouldn't stop interacting with her and it made her become a menace. So that's what I was talking about. I don't think sometimes people realize like we are all supposed to be living together, and the selfie game also, it's like just live in the moment. Sometimes just living in that moment, you don't really who what do we need all these pictures for? You think that your children 2 generations from now are going to care whether you had a selfie with something? No. I mean, it's kind of weird. Just enjoy some of the moments that you're in, instead of trying to document everything.
My pet dislike is the selfies in the bathroom at the mall or wherever in a it's my pet dislike. I'm not using the word hate here, but I don't
Yeah.
like it. I just don't understand it. It's going onto your phone and then maybe put onto social media for validation or comment. Um, and I'm thinking, wait, what is this kind of thinking or consciousness that's going on around trying to get validation in one's identity?
Yeah, I think we're all trying to figure out how do we feel good enough.
Yeah, I do think that's a very deep-seated belief within people as a
Yes.
as a generalization, is just the need to love the self and
Yeah.
like the self as well, and just understand who we are. And that is the defined process. I mean, who in their sovereign identity would allow what is happening globally to happen to them as people?
Right.
Um, and I mean, we can get into discussion about politics and all of it. It doesn't matter. It's all part of the big stage
Sure.
of what it is. And unless you are fully sovereign within yourself and mastered in that dynamic, which is a journey,
Hmm.
then you're going to be made an example of or made to do something that be taken from you.
Hmm.
So I think that's the mass consciousness that we are really working on. Now, I'm seeing the awakening. I'm seeing people going,
Yes.
no, this is not me. This is not what I want to do. I need to strengthen certain parts of myself and being accountable for that. and that I'm thoroughly enjoying, because that is a journey that is of ownership.
I have a whole interview process I do with people before I do any one-on-one work with them. I do sell the machines for people who want to buy them. And then when I do one-on-one work, if somebody's looking for a magic tool, I don't take those kind of clients, because you do have to be able to look at the self and look inward. That's what's going to really make you successful. The frequency is a help to all of that. And it makes the process a little quicker, because you can move old energies out easier, that like people that dance or exercise do. But I do have a whole process for that, because if you're looking for a magic bullet or pill, there is no such thing. And I don't take those clients because they're not going to be willing to do the work to grow. So I understand what you mean.
Yeah, one of the earlier podcasts, I was chatting with a friend of mine, and I was just saying that I get clients coming in, and they feel very good because they've released their stress. They've let go of all of this buildup of energy and frequency. But that's the last I see of them,
Oh,
because they're feeling good, thinking everything is
right,
solved, everything is ready, and their
right,
$10 bill that they've got or whatever
right.
is what they need, and off they go. What's going to happen as the old belief systems, the old vibration, the old frequency start to re-impact, and
Right.
they just dive down again, to a lower level. I mean, those things are gifts as well that come into us. Those messages, those realizations, they're absolute gifts for us. But what do we do with those? That's always my question. What do we do it for within ourselves? Because if I'm not in a healed state, then I can't heal somebody else, and I don't
Right.
intend to. They must fix themselves. But I always feel my job is to point out certain aspects or processes that they can go think about.
Mhm.
So, take the mantle, I always say, and run yourself. But nobody can fix you except you.
You. That happened to me when I was in the toxic relationship. I couldn't figure out how I got in it. I was like, I don't even know how I let this person like get a hold of me like this. And you know, I realized there wasn't nobody could do anything for me. I could pray, I could talk to people, I could complain about it, but ultimately nobody could do anything. It was me that had to go inside of me and find out, why was I allowing this. So yeah, you have to. I think that we, like, again, I think this is where consciousness is going, is people are going to start coming back into them and learning how they want to operate and learning who they want to be, and
Hmm.
you know doing just that. I mean, the Bible's filled. I don't know if anybody's ever read the Bible, but the Bible's filled. The New Testament is filled with like Jesus explaining how to do those kind of things, how to manage our mind and what different realities there are. Um, it's just fascinating when you put all that together, because we really do get to have a lot of say in how we live our life. Every choice has some type of consequence, and I learned that the hard way when I was young. I made bad choices and I had bad consequences. And then when I made better choices, I had better consequences.
Correct. Yeah. That's a fascinating process. Life can be a minefield as we go through
Mhm.
all of these things. But if we are prepared to understand that there's a lesson in every moment and adapt that to our awareness or our consciousness at that particular point of time, things tend to ease a lot more.
Mhm. I had a little episode last week that I was really proud of the way I handled it. I didn't realize that you don't, when something doesn't, like when something negative happens that came out of nowhere, I don't know that I realized it in this way until it happened to me. I have a 17-year-old dog who's about 40 pounds, and he is just the most docile dog you've ever seen. And we were out walking, and we were in the grass, and he was sniffing the grass, and a gentleman comes down the road who has this big black dog who is carrying on. And he's saying to me, my dog is friendly and he wants to say hello to your dog. And I'm like, no, I don't think he's friendly. He doesn't look friendly. And as I'm kind of turning my body to like put a barrier between his dog and my dog, because he keeps coming at me, even though I'm saying, no, I'm saying, no, that's okay. That's okay. His dog bites my dog and he takes off. And I'm looking at my dog and I realize he does have, he had a puncture wound above his eyelid. And he didn't get him in the eye. And I didn't get mad. And I was like, kind of questioning myself, like, why am I not mad? And I was like, well, let me think through this. He did not think his dog was going to bite my dog, because he didn't have that energy. The man didn't have the energy of, I'm trying to somehow hurt you today. I think he really thought his dog was going to calm down and be friendly. He thought he was acting the way he was because he wanted to interact with my dog. So he leaves, and because he doesn't realize that something's wrong, because I'm just leaning down trying to ascertain what happened. And so I take my dog back to the house and I realize he has the puncture wound in his eye, and I take him to the vet and there's a vet bill. And I just said to myself, it's okay, because I'm so grateful that I didn't get all wound up. I didn't need to use all this extra energy. It was a weird thing that happened. Did I want it to happen? No, but it came out of nowhere. So life hit me and I was like, do I really need to put all this energy into being negative? I was like, no, it is what it is. It wasn't worse and I'm going to move on. So I see him yesterday and he says to me, how's your dog doing? And I said, well, I had to take him to the vet because he had a puncture wound and we had to get antibiotics. And, he said, oh my goodness, bring the vet bill by my house and I'll be happy to pay it. Mm. Right. So I could have got myself all wound up over that episode and I could have focused on how that wasn't fair and all of this, but I've done so much work that I was just like, well, I mean, it is what it is and we are where we are. And I'm going to be grateful that it didn't, get his eyeball or take his eyeball out. And I'm grateful that I was able to pay the vet bill. And look at that. Didn't it come back around? And I didn't even know where the man lived. So it worked out, is my point. And I feel like that's how to go with the flow of life, right? And I didn't, looking back at it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't have to expend any negative, like I didn't expend any energy on the negative, and it worked out within, 7 days.
It's fascinating, isn't it, when you can have that
Yeah.
insight and trust yourself also enough to allow it just to unfold to where it's going to go to.
Mm-hmm.
I
was pretty excited about that.
In this aspect of when you define right or wrong, there's a sense of self-righteousness also that comes up within oneself. And that's also one of my major dislikes that I'm seeing. With the full awareness, if I'm seeing it externally happening, then you got to own whatever's going on within yourself.
Sure.
At that same point.
I had a lot of self-righteousness when I was in the toxic relationship because he behaved badly and I did not. And I thought I was better than him because I wasn't behaving badly. That's the truth. And I had to work that out inside of me. I'm going to use the word God because I believe in God. And I was saying to God, I don't understand like why this is happening. He's like, well, you think you're better than him because you don't make the bad choices he makes. And it really taught me how to love somebody unconditionally with boundaries and not allowing them to re-access me. But I did go through that period. So I can attest to, I've been in the shoes where I have been the person who thought I was behaving better. He did drugs. I did not. And I really had this chip on my shoulder that if you did drugs, you were a bad person. But what I realized was if you're doing drugs, you're probably a really hurt person and you have no idea how to get the healing that you're looking for. But it took me, years of dealing with somebody who was doing that for me to have that understanding. So I understand that.
And the benefit of this is that anybody who comes into your space on any level, you can see straight through it now.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. And, even though what he did, he had mental health issues, very large ones. And again, even with that, I had to, and he was medicating himself. So this is how he was managing things, which I think a lot of people do, because maybe they don't know how to get control of their mind or their thoughts. They don't know where to go to get the right kind of help. But yeah, it definitely was humbling to me because I didn't know I was that person until it was happening. And again, had I not gone inside of myself and said, okay, God, tell me what to do here, because I keep praying that these bad things and these bad habits will go away, and they're not. And again, he was in my life for a reason, and I was in his life for a reason. So he's still who he is, I'm sure, today. And I have changed immensely from that, because it was, like I said, a really humbling process to have to. It's okay to face these negative parts of yourself too, you know? And I think sometimes people like that about me, is I will share how I did have a thought process that wasn't good, and how did I come back out of that thought process to be where I'm at now. Because sometimes our thoughts will, especially negative thoughts like that, you know, some people will leave somebody who's in a toxic relationship and they will hate that person the rest of their life. And they just keep pointing the finger at them instead of saying, okay, we were both supposed to learn something from it. And it was supposed to happen that way, because that's how we were both going to learn whatever it is we needed to learn.
Absolutely.
So there isn't so much right or wrong. I used to be very more, when I was young, you know, I was raised in church, and it was right or wrong. Like, you do this or you do that. And I learned that that's not how life is. I started learning that right away in the first jobs that I had. Life is lived in the gray area, and that's actually what you want to get good at, is living in the gray area, because not everything is black or white, and it's not all what you think it is.
Absolutely. And not to have to define something as real or not real, but as it is at this moment. And where are you in the middle of all of this? You know, can you expand into it, or are you not going to
Right.
expand into it? I think that's a whole conversation all by itself.
Well, even just trauma in and of itself, you know, some people will look at trauma and a trauma, and you'll go, oh, that's not so bad, because their trauma was so much worse. They're like, how can you even call that a trauma? That's also a thing that we can do. I know I've had it to myself where somebody said, oh, that's traumatic. And I'm like, that's not traumatic. Like, to me, that's not that traumatic, but to them it is. Or I've seen someone else the opposite way, where it's a small one, and I wanted to say, oh, wow, that doesn't seem like that big, like you're giving a giant response, because also people have different levels of sensitivity.
Very much so. And perspective over something in terms of that dynamic. Very, very much there.
Yeah.
Michelle, we've been talking for 45 minutes.
Wow.
Can you believe that? It's wonderful.
No, I can't.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and thank you for coming onto the podcast. We'll make sure we put your contact details, your website, and your socials all onto this video. And I'd love to have some feedback from you at some point as to anybody who's come into you because of the conversation and shared that space, and perhaps they'd like to come onto the podcast too, just so we can share the healing journey, the journey to wholesomeness, into wholeness, into who we are as a sovereign being. Those stories fascinate me. I love having these conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate you taking this time to talk to me. It was wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Yes. And conscious conversation, which I truly, truly enjoy at the same time.
Me too.
Michelle, we'll be right back 1 second.